It's plain and simple. The Kansas State Wildcats are completely out of excuses on the offense with Dylan Edwards back and the need for Avery Johnson to unleash his feet.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rao, and thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day. Welcome back to my everydayers. This episode is brought to you by Mazda. Like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, pulling off the unexpected is only the beginning. Stay tuned later for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward Mazda Move and Be Moved. I mentioned at the beginning, right from the get-go, Kansas State's offense out of excuses. Dylan Edwards is now back. Yes, that is the highlight of today's episode. We're going to dive deep into it. Avery Johnson needing to unleash his legs and move forward and being that dual threat quarterback we all hope he can be. It is being a thought thrown out, not just by us anymore, but by the offensive coordinator, the head coach at multiple different occasions. And yet again, in the press conferences on Thursday, the Wildcats just got to come out swinging from the first snap on Saturday versus UCF. We're going to dive all into that, talk the defense as well. And then at the end of the episode, the Big 12 might have some equal standing when it comes to the table of the new college football playoff scenarios in the future. We're going to talk about that one on this one. Hit that subscribe button. Locked On Kansas State, bringing you Wildcat coverage like no one else every single day right here, your team every day. Matt Wells spoke with the media on Thursday, and biggest takeaway, without question, Dylan Edwards is back, and that's going to be some exciting stuff. Dylan Edwards back. Avery Johnson needs to run more, and fast starts must come now. That's exactly what I got. My key takeaways, too long didn't read when it comes to Matt Wells in his press conference. Dylan Edwards' return is huge for both the run game and for RPOs, something that has struggled so mightily this entire season so far. Defenses just can't key on Avery Johnson anymore, and really that makes you wonder if they even have been keying on him. Maybe that's why his success isn't there, or is it just a blunder on the play calling? We will find out this Saturday if Dylan Edwards is 100%. If we still have a nugget when it comes to not having a good running game, a failed RPO, then we know it's not on the talent side because we've seen this work in the past. I give you Exhibit A, the bowl game against Rutgers, where Dylan Edwards went completely off. Avery Johnson had a fantastic comeback game. So if we can't get this rolling this week against UCF, then that problem lies deeper than just the players. Edwards' presence should be amazing. I really do think it's going to be great. This is exciting. Gives us back that optimistic feels we had in the offseason. If you can ignore the record and just look at this game as what it is, you got to be excited. It should open shots downfield. It should balance the offense. It should have that good feelings. And I think it's a perfect moment coming out of the bye week where you can have that refresh and that reset that these coaches and players and leaders of the staff have been talking about this entire week. This kind of changes that narrative of me questioning the fact of, is it just lip service about this reset button from this coaching staff and these players earlier this week? Because having a star player back gives you that motivation, gives you that juice, if you will. And there's a lot of exciting stuff that you can bring out a team that hasn't lost the football game yet. In UCF, they have a lot to play for this week for sure. Under Scott Frost, the unfortunate news of one of their coaches passing away. There's a lot for that team to play for. They're not going to go down by any means easy. So everything has to be firing in all cylinders with Dylan Edwards back. You feel a lot better entering this game on Saturday. At least I do. Avery Johnson's dual threat. I mean, I have questioned this week for the first time in the existence of this show, Locked On Kansas State. And maybe the first time in the existence of my brain, I have questioned the fact that Avery Johnson, is he a dual threat quarterback or not? And it's because of maybe the play calling, maybe the fact of his performance wasn't so good against Arizona, arguably his worst game in a Kansas State uniform that past Friday against Arizona Wildcats. Well, we mentioned last week when Matt Wells filled in for Chris Kleiman on the Chris Kleiman show that he wants Avery Johnson to run the football more. He said it again on Thursday, days before the UCF game. Wells wants Avery to run aggressively. His legs are a weapon, but he has to strike the right balance between scrambling and overextending plays. Okay. What I love about this is that he's talking about it again days before the game. He brought it up a week before and now days before, and there's been practices in between there. There's been a reset in between there, and it sounds like it's a focus and something that's on the mind of Matt Wells. So it sounds like they've definitely been working on it. Avery Johnson should be running the ball more against UCF on Saturday. Huge if true. Absolutely huge if true. Avoids Avery drifting too far behind tackles. Which causes holding calls. You don't want that to happen, but you got to find a way to get the RPO working. You got to find a way to get him designed in the run. You got to make sure that you have controlled and decisive scrambles when that does happen as well. But when there is an opportunity, Avery Johnson needs to take it. He needs to, and plain and simple, what Chris Kleiman said on Monday, just needs to take off and run. There's no need to have that delay. Try not to be trying to be the perfect quarterback. Try to be that playmaker that this Kansas State offense needs. And I think Avery Johnson hopefully can change that on Saturday. There was a lot of adjustment talk, a lot of focus, a lot of reset talks. Those buzzwords did not go anywhere when discussing what happened over the bye week. The staff used the bye week for self-scouting. That's what they reported, what Matt Wells said, what works, what doesn't, redefining fundamentals. And that's always a good thing. Fundamentals don't go away when you're playing at the collegiate level, the professional level. Fundamentals are always still a huge thing. Now, sometimes you might think, well, why do they have to worry about fundamentals as a Power 4 school? That's the name of the game. Sometimes you forget those, and going back to them make a lot of these other structures and schemes a lot easier and hopefully firing on all cylinders. That hair on fire feel that we want from this Kansas State team. Major emphasis, again, on running the football better, protecting the quarterback, and avoiding negative plays that put them behind the chains. All sound like obvious answers, right? But the running back portion is huge. And it's not just the Dylan Edwards news either. I think you have to put the emphasis on running the ball better and then take the Dylan Edwards portion out of it. You have to probably practice this week with the scenario of doing a 2-minute offense, doing a couple drives with Dylan Edwards on the sideline for practice, not for the actual game, because you haven't been able to rely on him this entire season so far. He tried to go during the Arizona game, wasn't fully ready to go, only had 4 carries, and then was out for the rest of the game. Of course, lost him on the first snap of the Iowa State game, and he was out for those 3 games beforehand. So there is a small chance, hopefully it's not a big chance, but there is still a small chance that Dylan Edwards won't be able to go in every drive. Hopefully the coaches worked that through. They took care of that in their game plan this week. Something that was a huge question mark we talked about after the Iowa State game, where we kind of gave them the benefit of the doubt, saying that, well, the offense just wasn't rolling in that first half because so many things were planned around Dylan Edwards. Hopefully they didn't make that same mistake this week heading into Saturday. Third down struggles were traced back to poor first and second down execution, according to Matt Wells, and too many long yardage situations. Completely agree. You got to find a way to get in better situations on that third downs. I think that helps the entire talking about this play calling issue of not being able to throw it past the sticks, calling plays that just don't work on third and long. Maybe there's just not enough plays in his playbook to make happen. And maybe there's just not enough plays in many coaches' playbooks. But finding yourself in 3rd and 3 instead of 3rd and 8 changes that scenario completely. Just don't put yourself in that situation. Completely agree. Trying to find yourself getting better on third downs for sure. Execution and accountability, more buzzwords we heard. Well stressed, everybody's is owning these losses. Play calling, protection schemes, quarterback decision-making, drops, fundamentals. He goes to fundamentals again. And I like that, because we've shouted it out. Is it talent? Is it play calling? Well, they're putting it all in one bucket. They're saying that it is on everybody. Everybody's owning it. We got to move forward. That's the best way to it. That is great leadership from Matt Wells, from these veteran players, and I certainly applaud it for sure. 3 one-score losses so far this season have defined just a few plays, and a few flipped outcomes. I mean, this is a team that if every single outcome by one score or less was changed, this team's a 3-1 ball game. And the only loss you have is to an FCS school, right? Because that was a 1-score game as well. If you win every single one of your 1-score games this year, you're in the same boat as you are with Iowa State. You are undefeated. You are 4-0. Now, I get it. That's not the case we're in right now. We're 1-3, but you have to find a way to overcome these small games, these short coming games, these close matchups, because there's a good chance, a very good chance, that you're in that same boat on Saturday against UCF. Before we move on to the break, there was a couple other things that Matt Wells talked about, said there were some emerging young players he really liked. Of course, brought up Lincoln Cure, Gus Hawkins. Some other players were highlighted and improving during the bye. Gotta love that stuff from Kansas State's young offensive players. If you get them in and they play like Hawkins and Cure, fantastic. But I don't want to see a lot of young players play this week and for the next couple weeks, to be completely honest with you, because if they start switching to that youth movement right away, that means they're playing damage control. That means they're punting on the season. And that means we're probably 1-4, meaning we lost to UCF. So I don't want that to happen, although I am excited for the future of this recruiting class and this freshman class from Kansas State. Fast starts are still missing for Kansas State. Had many 3-and-outs, have many starts where they just haven't been good earlier in the game. Of course, you can easily look back at that Iowa State game when they were really tough and dreadful in that first half. Blame the weather if you want. But with the no consistency, of course, the drops, overthrows as well, wasn't just on Avery, but at the same time, still got to put some on Avery. And pressures from that offensive line have killed opening drives. So they got to find a way to get better there. That's a good emphasis. And we will, of course, talk about that in the reaction show on Saturday, how well their first drives went. Either way, lots of good stuff to talk about from Matt Wells. Sounds like they're rejuvenated. Maybe the return of Dylan Edwards does that for them. But overall, exciting stuff to get ready for Saturday, hopefully to move to 2-3 on the season, but most importantly, 1-1 in Big 12 play. Next, let's talk about Joe Klanderman said, defensive coordinator, energy, gap discipline, and stopping a more mobile quarterback will be keys against UCF on Saturday. We'll do that next right here on Locked On Kansas State. But first, this episode of Locked On Kansas State is brought to you by DoorDash. It's almost the weekend. It's time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash, just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streak. Saving more every time you order. These players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it down. We got to go back a little bit because we had the bye week last week, but I'm still going with Jace Brown. That huge play he had to open up the second half gave life to that team. Even though they did lose that one against Arizona, it would have been a completely different ball game, maybe even a blowout if it wasn't for Jace Brown bringing the energy back to the Kansas State in the second half of this one. When the pressure was on, he came through, and he has been coming through. Death, taxes, and big play Jace all season long, and it's not a fluke. Jace Brown is on a streak, and just like Jace Brown delivered for Kansas State, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays with DoorDash Streaks. Save every Saturday you order. Stack it up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through 11/18. And of course, this episode of Locked On Kansas State is also brought to you by our good friends at FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and there's a lot of stuff to be excited about with the NFL season. With kickoff, you don't want to have this can't-miss offer from FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if that bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Lots of good games coming up. Kansas City Chiefs, can they bounce back? It's been a tough run so far for Kansas City. If you believe in them, perfect time to throw in maybe some futures or that same game parlay. You can knock that out with FanDuel. So if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place that first $5 bet. Energy, gap discipline, and stopping a mobile quarterback are what the keys are going to be against UCF on Saturday. At least that's what Joe Klanderman focused on in his presser on Thursday, and we're going to talk about that here on this episode. Hit the subscribe button, bringing you Kansas State coverage like no one else right here on Locked On Kansas State, your team every day. Quarterback containment issues have been an issue for Kansas State so far this season. Gave up 7 rushing touchdowns to quarterbacks already this year. Noah Fafita had a game where he rushed for more yards than I think he has in his entire collegiate career against Kansas State this last week. Lots of struggles against quarterbacks, and it's possibly could be an issue for them this week. Tayven Jackson has been an interesting quarterback for UCF. And this is a guy who didn't get the starting job. If you go back to crossovers I had with Mike G earlier this week, we talked about Tayven Jackson pretty in whole, and he was discussing how Tayven Jackson didn't get the starting job. But many fans didn't believe it. They were dumbfounded because they thought he was the guy. He comes in after an injury to Cam Fancher and just shows that he should have had the job the entire time. Sounds like the offense, the coaching staff actually really like having Tayven there, and he has really proven it, especially after beating the brakes off North Carolina just last week. The struggles with pockets, containing the pocket has been an issue for Kansas State. That can't happen on Saturday versus UCF, especially in the red zone or third down situations. You got to find a way to get your defense off the field. That has been such a big struggle and a big conversation that we have had all season long. You go back to the Iowa State game where we felt, man, this defense just felt gassed. Did they not have enough practices in the offseason? And then you go weeks farther and you get to the Service Academy game against Army, and they never got off the field. And, of course, you want to make that excuse of, well, Army will beat you up. They'll get you 3-4 yards a pop. But at the same, and that kick return could have been the biggest problem you ever had because the defense popped right back on there after the kick return touchdown. But either way, the defense never fully did their job and got off the field. You got to find a way to do that against a team like UCF, somebody who's really found their stride in the first year back for Scott Frost. And as I mentioned earlier in this show, got a lot to play for this coming week in Manhattan. Scott Frost started his coaching career as a GA in Kansas State. So call it personal if you want. He said he enjoyed his time in Manhattan, but you got to think he's going to want to beat this team more than maybe others because he has that historical context with this program. UCF's quarterback, Tayven Johnson, just had a big rushing game. Huge focus this week will be on discipline in the pass rush lanes, said Joe Klanderman. Defensive resets as well. Again, bringing that reset back to this entire conversation. That was a huge leading term for this entire bye week, talking about how they need to do resets. Biggest focus was simplifying schemes, is what the defensive coordinator Joe Klanderman said. Play faster and bring more enthusiasm and energy to the defense. All sounds like great stuff. Just got to get off the field. The Arizona loss exposed the lack of physicality and urgency at times. He came out and said he didn't feel like there was enough gusto. He didn't think there was enough gusto from this defense. He needs more. And maybe that's not the right word I would have used, but I understand what he's getting at. He didn't see the energy. You can go back to some of Chris Kleiman's words. Didn't see the discipline and execution. And, of course, he knows the talent's there on this defense. You have an All-American in Austin Romaine, should be All-American in Austin Romaine, who hasn't lived up to his hype. That's a perfect player to point at and say, you haven't been as good as you should be. Then, definitely got to make the rest of the defense work hard as well. If Austin Romaine, the guy that you expect to be as good as he should be, isn't living up to the hype, it makes sense that you're not getting the expectations from everybody else as well. So, yeah, I agree. The defense needs that gusto, needs that energy, needs that boost, and that needs to happen by stopping Tayven Jackson running and throwing the football on Saturday. Talked about how they're going to work more on, discipline in the pass rush lanes, fundamentals and gaps. Too many defenders standing in gaps instead of attacking is what he was discussing on Thursday, leading to missed stops. Examples talking about the 3rd and 4 play against Arizona that extended the drive. There's been multiple times this season, and I've seen on social media, I've seen it when I'm looking at PFF stats or advanced box scores, where there's been multiple 3rd downs and longs. 3rd and 4 is like one of the shortest ones, but of course that was a really important play as well, where you're getting to a 3rd and 13 or even a couple of 4th down plays. And these offenses are finding ways to expand the drive and keeping Kansas State's defense on the field. You can't have that. If you get them in a 3rd and serious, just like on the flip side, you don't want Kansas State's offense to get in a 3rd and 8 or 3rd and 7, because then you're throwing these, your playbook is limited to where you're throwing it in front of the sticks. Put them in the same situation. Put Scott Frost and his offense in the same situation. Force them on 3rd and 8. Or what I like to call 3rd and serious, something longer than 3rd and 5, a tough way to go where you can't just run the football and hope they get you get it there. So I want to see that from Kansas State's defense this week. I think they can do it. They have the opportunity to do it. Hopefully this bye week came at the perfect time. We discussed leadership guys and energy guys this past week with some of the players coming and talking about how they felt like they've played 4 different types of games this year, where 4 different teams showed up for 4 different games, and how they need to do this reset. Well, Joe Klanderman brought up and said there's a lot of vocal leaders that are stepping up. And he talked about Austin Romaine being one, Cody Seffel being VJ Payne, but talked about Quay Moss as well. Really dug into Quay Moss and said he has an infectious energy, and he's a catalyst who plays all out, even if not perfect. And then went on to say, not every team's going to be perfect. Even if you win the national championship, you're not going to be perfect. But a guy like Quay Moss really changes your entire defense. Remember, he came over in the transfer portal. Some people, myself included, are not that impressed with our entire transfer class living up to the expectations, but Quay Moss is not in that list of players that are not living up to the hype. He has definitely killed it so far this season. He's been so good. Blitzing and pressure. Blitzing hasn't been consistent, hasn't been that effective either. And, that comes down to execution as well this year. And it comes down to being gassed, not having the opportunities to do so. And if you can't stop on those third down stops and the drives keep going, well, it's tough to make that blitz as well. Blitzes work a lot more when your front four gets pressure in itself, when you don't have to blitz. But when you do finally do those blitzes and you get that pressure from your front four, then it becomes an overwhelming situation for the offensive line. So blitzing's not working in general as a whole for the defense, but I think that all starts on the defensive line, on the front four, to get that pressure regardless if there's a blitz or not. It just gives that offensive line on the opposite side even more of a trouble when they're bringing that front floor plus another guy or two on a blitz. Ryan Davis working back after injury. Joe Klanderman brought up, was really happy that he's back. He's back into full speed, exciting stuff. Brought up some other young players that have really impressed him. Malcolm Alcorn Crowder, Gabe Powers. Of course, Logan Bartley and Daniel Cobbs have really impressed him and said they could earn more snaps together. So overall, these are the 2 things that we really got from the coordinators this past Thursday from the press conferences heading into UCF. Again, Dylan Edwards is back. Avery Johnson needs to run the ball more, and faster starts have to come right away. And then energy, gap discipline, stopping the mobile quarterback, and Tayven Johnson. I mean, you could make the argument that Tayven Jackson has had a better season so far than Avery Johnson. I saw a quarterback power ranking go out the other day about the Big 12. I can't remember who it was. Maybe it wasn't even credible. But they had Avery Johnson as the 15th best quarterback in the Big 12. What do you think about that? I think that's a little too low, even though he hasn't had the best season so far this season. So let me know what you think. Will Kansas State's offense finally find its rhythm? And can this defense contain UCF's mobile attack? Because it's going to be a tough game. It's going to be a really tough game. Right now, FanDuel has the odds, Kansas State as a 4.5-point favorite. If you can get it even higher, do it. Take the points. Could be a good one. Drop your tanks in the comment below. Hit that subscribe button right here. Locked On Kansas State, your team every day. All right, the college football playoffs might be about to change again. And that's exciting stuff, actually, because the Big 12 could actually come out a winner, but there's a catch. It all depends on whether the SEC plays nice. We're going to discuss that next to finish up this show right here on Locked On Kansas State. But first, this episode of Locked On Kansas State is brought to you by our friends at Mazda. Moving the game forward, for those who believe it or not, it's not about just playing the game. It's about redefining it. And there are moments that do more than just put points on the board. They move crowds, move culture, and keep the game moving forward. This week's moment that moved the game forward, I'm actually going to go in the future in this one. I'm going to say Dylan Edwards. The fact that he's back is moving the game forward. It's exciting. It could be redefining. It could be a moment that puts the points on the board and gets this team and this program and the fans back on board for a season that could maybe sneak them into Arlington. I mean, the chances are still there. Statistically, yes. Realistically, maybe. So when you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there is more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. Well, as I mentioned, the college football playoffs might change again. And Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports came out with an article on Wednesday night. The college football playoffs future format still up in the air as power conference leaders mull a new working group. And it all depends on what will happen, of course. This stuff is all up in the air and it's all hypothetical, it seems, at the moment. But it seems like the Big 12 could actually come out a winner. But there is a catch. If the SEC will play nice, and we'll talk about what I mean by that in just a minute, the Big 12 might finally have a seat at the table, an equal seat at the table. And because that's a new working group that's being formed. at least according to this article by Russ Dellinger. Power conference commissioners want 2 to 3 athletic directors from each league, the SEC, the Big 10, ACC, and the Big 12, to shape out the playoff format options. This gives the Big 12 a direct seat at the table. It's crucial to make sure that they aren't drowned by SEC or Big 10 power, because that's where we're leaning at, where who's getting the edge when it comes to, just having the power 2 that they like to call themselves at times. This is a shift in philosophy, though, because the equal auto bids are actually on the table. The Big 10 is floating an equal distribution model, and it's actually funny that the Big 10's doing it, because it's completely different than what the Big 10 has put out in the past. But each power league, including the Big 12, would get the same number of automatic qualifiers in an expanded, and this is the kicker here, a 20-plus team playoff. I don't know how you feel about that. What do you think about 20 or more teams in the college football playoff? So either way, they're floating an equal distribution model with this one. This could be a major about face for the Big 12 with this past model thought process in the past about being 4-4, 2-2, or things that we've seen earlier in proposals. Because the Big 10 and the SEC definitely favored themselves with extra bids in the past. If you look at the old plan versus the new plan, Big 10 and SEC would have got those 4 auto bids, while ACC and Big 12 only got 2 apiece. Now with this new proposal, all 4 leagues could get 3 to 4 auto bids each, and it's a win for the Big 12 because it levels that playing field. And in a conference like the Big 12, and we've seen it all the time, we're seeing it again this year. It's probably going to happen by the time the season's over with. It's such a dog-eat-dog conference where you have teams that have the ability to be one of the top teams in the country, find themselves in the AP top 25, if you still believe that's a credible source, and they wind up losing 2 games in the season in conference because there are so many good teams inside the Big 12. That was an issue of why they're not doing the preseason media poll anymore, because of how Arizona State, BYU, teams like that were treated last season. Having them at this nice equal playing ground might actually be a good thing. At first, I wasn't a big fan of these auto bids, especially because of the 4-4-2-2. But if you're going to give all Power 4 conferences the exact same auto bids, then I'm actually for it. I think it's a good thing, and I think it might be a safe call, if you will, for the Big 12. Latest concept also carves out 1 to 2 guaranteed spots for Group of 5, Group of 6, whatever you want to call it, those non-power leagues like the Sun Belt, Mountain West, AAC. So even so, equal footing, the Big 12 looks to have some nice security moving forward, something they didn't have in the past. But what I think this is going to mean when you say 20 plus, this is probably going to try and set up for a 24-team format, which means that you can include up to 6 at-large spots. You can give Big 12 programs additional pathways as well, other than the auto bids, which is especially helpful if multiple teams finish strong in a given year. And even if you have a down year, a dog-eat-dog year, you're still getting those auto bids. I think it's exciting. But of course, there's probably some ripple effects to what this means. And if you're getting auto bids and those auto bids are probably more than 2, that means the championship game, Dr. Pepper, right? The battle for all 23 flavors, it's probably at risk. Expansion beyond 12 or 14 teams might eliminate conference title games. Now, if you go to 24, I think it's absolutely over which the Big 12 itself relies on revenue and exposure. We talk about Dr. Pepper being like a big thing with the Big 12. That trade-off, guaranteed playoff spots, could help that revenue. College football playoffs paid pretty well last season. So I think it could be a good thing. But losing a conference championship game, as the fan in me, as a college football fan, I don't like it. But in this new world of college football, this adapt or die situation, I think if that's the thing that has to go to keep the Big 12, keep the ACC alive, afloat compared to the Big 10 and the SEC, then maybe you have to make it happen. Best case scenario, the Big 12 goes from being treated as a second-tier league in the Power 4, because that's, let's face it, that's what it is right now, to having guaranteed playoff access equal to the SEC and the Big 10. But the worst case scenario, well, the SEC refuses to sign off. Maybe they don't play nice, because this is a proposal by the Big 10. And then the Big 12 risks being sidelined if the power balance shifts back to unequal ground on those 4-4-2-2 bids, or maybe even worse. Nothing's set in stone right now. The only thing that's set in stone is what we just got coming this season with still the 12-team playoff, but the seeding and the automatic buys are not just handed to conference winners. Either way, the Big 12's influence in the working group is a make or break for its national credibility moving forward. This could be the first time in years the Big 12 sits at the playoff table as an equal. It's exciting stuff, but there's also some downfalls, but only if the SEC plays ball. And we'll see if the SEC and Commissioner Sankey will actually do that. The stakes aren't just about playoff spots. It's about the Big 12 proving they belong in the same conversation, the same tier of influence as the SEC and the Big 10. So we'll see what happens. Lots of time to still figure it out. Probably going to be a conversation we hear about all offseason. But when Ross Dellinger puts out one of these conversations, it's a must read for me. And I love explaining it and sharing it with all you folks. So what do you think? Should the Big 12 get an equal slice of the playoff pie? I mean, I feel like it's obvious, but if you disagree, let me know. Or will the SEC and the Big 10 find a way to tip the scales back like they have in the past? Drop your thoughts in the comment description below. Subscribe if you haven't already and hit that like button. We're growing the Kansas State Wildcats page every single day right here on Locked On Kansas State. I appreciate you so much for joining me on this episode. We'll be back here with another one real soon. We're real close. UCF game on Saturday. Of course, we will be having a live reaction show when the game is over. So much to talk about, and hopefully we get to talk about a win. It feels like it's been so long since we've finally been able to do that. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening. Please like the video. Please subscribe, and we'll see you back here next time, right here on Locked On Kansas State.